Welcome back to the channel. This is Trinity Storm and you are watching 7th and final part of What If Naruto Became Dual Half-Breed. If you enjoy this video, please like, share and subscribe to the channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
As she lunged at her opponent, her claws dashed through his body, only to pass through again before a blow connected to the center of her spine. After slamming into the ground, she turned and lashed out, only for her opponent to mysteriously vanish again. She screamed as another of the ninja knives pierced her flesh, this time in the back of her leg, leaping back onto her feet, growling as she searched for any signs of him. What in the world is this? Nobody should be able to stand up to me. You are an ancient life form that has been around for far too long. However, I am glad you did. Her adversary said this as he appeared in front of her in a swirl of orange light. With you, I can realize my dream while wreaking havoc on those who oppose me. So you're the ones he mentioned. Farrell growled as she locked her gaze on the man before her, her pupils constricted as he revealed himself without fear of what she could do to him. But you're not very bright. You not only believe you can control that monster, but you have just made your biggest mistake. She sprinted towards him, using all of her Banpai Ryoku to end this in one fell swoop. But just as she was about to approach him, she noticed something out of the corner of her eye. A massive scale-like sword was about to sever her in half. She was forced to jump into the air after leaping to the side to avoid being split as the ground beneath her literally turned into spikes and nearly skewered her. But as soon as she jumped into the air, she felt a powerful force slam into her, but she couldn't see it. As Kanai began to strike her limbs and the plants around her rose and wrapped her torso and neck, pinning her down into the ground, she skidded across the ground, grimacing from the blow. She nearly screamed out. Madara's lone eye gazed at the vampire below him as he thrust his sword through her stomach as she struggled against her confides. And it was never just you who was fighting. You were taking on the entire Red Dawn. Farrell growled as the other seven surrounded her, spitting into his mask because he couldn't do anything else. You worthless people. You will not receive anything from me. Oh no, we won't. I respectfully disagree. Once he realizes, I'll have my final piece to resurrect Beliar. Madara responded as he began to go through hand seals because they couldn't move her as she was. Her eyes slowly began to widen before her, and she began to scream as she felt her very being pulled away from her and brought towards the masked one. He felt a little better after helping with the village's reconstruction. He had been a part of the force that had taken this village by storm, and it just made him feel a little better that he was helping them rebuild because this had once been his home, and he still felt loyalty to it. So he did his part for the village while also spending time with his family and girlfriend. Yamato was doing the majority of the work, but many people wanted to rebuild their homes and workplaces exactly how they wanted them. So he helped them and is now assisting Shuza in rebuilding his restaurant. Because he wanted to eat there once before they left. He was a good cook. What are you doing? Nibby laughed as she wrapped her arms around her lover's chest and buried her head between his shoulder blades. Most people would have fled from such a surprise and unexpected sneak attack. Itachi, on the other hand, was unfazed as he hammered the nail into the 2x4. Assisting with the rebuilding. Instead of standing around doing nothing, I thought it would be beneficial to assist. What is your true motivation? Nibby grinned because she knew him too well and knew there was an ulterior motive for him assisting this particular person. Food. Delicious food. Even seafood is an option. Itachi responded in fragments, the last of which piqued Nibby's interest. The aforementioned cat demon descended from his back before picking up a 2x4 on her own and placing it above Itachi's. When she shut him up, he was about to say that she shouldn't be doing any heavy lifting given how far along she was. Work more quickly. I need my seafood right now. Itachi dutifully complied, knowing her wrath better than probably anyone else did. While he didn't have much to fear, it was just best to comply, as she could make his life a living hell if she didn't get what she wanted. She could throw some of the biggest hissy fits he had ever seen. He thought Sasuke was spoiled when he had left. Speaking of his little brother, Itachi glanced around as it was around this time Sasuke promised to take a break from his training and come help him so they could talk, utter syllables towards one another. Nibi, have you seen Sasuke lately? He was supposed to arrive by now. Nibi looked around for a moment, then closed her eyes for a moment before frowning, as she had heard Sasuke say as well. She lowered the 2x4 to see what was going on. Huh, that's strange. I'm not aware of his presence in the village. What? Itachi yelled because he was aware of Nibi's sensory abilities and wondered where he was if he wasn't in the village. Shuza approached them at that point, having heard what they were discussing and being concerned himself. Choji, Shikamaru, and Ino were supposed to be training alongside him and many other genin. Can you detect them as well? Nibi nodded as she found their presence, focusing for a moment as her abilities had been dampened by Naruto's rampage eons ago, despite the fact that her range was still the best among the Biju. I detect them near the rice, along with a swarm of fairly powerful shinobi. They're on their way to Naruto and... Oh no. Itachi didn't pause to hear another word. He knew exactly where Naruto was, and if Nibi's reaction was any indication, something bad was about to happen. Orochimaru sighed in relief as he worked diligently through his papers now that he had his clones do the majority of the work for him, as this job should be. All he had to do now was hand out mission statements, meet with his appointed elders, Tsunade and Jiraiya, as well as top Junin within the village, and finally teach the village's genin respect. He had almost no respect from them. Even his group began to act like the others. However, after a brief display of power and awe due to his status as a Sannin, they began to fear him. He was on guard in an instant, ready to unleash a shadow snake hand on the intruder, only to groan as he realized who it was. Jiraiya, could you please come in through the door? I swear I'm going to feed you to Tsunade one of these days if you don't. What's the deal with eating Jiraiya? I did it once when I lost a bet. Tsunade said as she walked through the door, dropping a small stack of papers on the desk. These are from the hospital, and they want you to know that it is back up and running at full capacity. Tsunade, gross. I didn't need to know about what you had previously said. Before I knew you blew the toad over here, I was happier. Orochimaru commented as he gave Tsunade a deadpan stare before turning to the aforementioned toad. And you, what do you have in store for me? I assumed you'd be gone for a while longer because the Akatsuki has been rather quiet lately. That's the problem. The Akatsuki appears to be different from before. They're easy to follow because they've been traveling together. Jiraiya stated as he entered the room and settled into a comfortable position. Okay, that's unsettling. 8 extremely powerful shinobi are moving and cooperating towards a common goal. It must be to make room for Rayne in case they come across her. Tsunade grimaced, knowing that if they all banded together at once, they'd be even more difficult to defeat. Jiraiya sighed and rubbed his temple slightly, as that was his first thought. That's what I assumed at first. But what I discovered was quite disturbing. They have lost interest in the Biju. They appear to have discovered another way to awaken Beliar. What? Before she emerged from the shadows, a new voice yelled, her red and emerald eyes gleaming dangerously at what she had heard. The only way to awaken the heart is to bring the 9 back to its altar and drain their power. Any other approach would simply result in failure. Nonetheless, it appears they may have discovered a different method. But what is strange is that they appear to be doing nothing but collecting Beliar's pieces. They aren't leaving any hints about what they're doing, which makes it difficult for me to figure out what this new way is. Jiraiya spilled the beans before slumping against the wall. Rayne flicked her blades forward as she gazed over at the toad hermit, her eyes narrowing for a moment and cursing the fact that it was still midday. I'll take care of it as soon as dusk falls. If they have truly discovered another way to awaken him, they must be stopped immediately. Now wait. Orochimaru said, his eyes narrowed as he looked over at Rayne. We know nothing about what they're up to. For all we know, this could be a trap, as Madara is aware of your behavior. No matter how powerful 8 humans are, they cannot defeat me. Whatever he has in store for me, I will be able to overcome. Just like I've done before. I've faced far harsher situations than anything man can conjure up, and I've succeeded where I should have failed. Whatever happens, when night falls, it's over. Rayne responded by flicking her blades back before double-checking her dragons to ensure they were fully loaded. No one else spoke as Rayne turned and left in a blur, and at the same time, Zaku and Kin were on the verge of breaking through the door to Orochimaru's office. Their action drew everyone's attention because they were both panting heavily before Zaku spoke. Lord Hokage. Asuma, Guy, and Kurenai have sent me a message. What exactly is it? Orochimaru responded as he looked at his young genin team, puzzled as to why they were panicking. Unless they were being attacked by Rayne. That was cause for concern. Kin spoke in place of Zaku, who was still struggling to catch his breath. As he was, a lone missing ninja breached our walls. Zaku cut Kin off before smacking him on the top of his head because he didn't know any better. As I previously stated, he was only there to convey a message to you that the Akatsuki were about to carry out the final stage of their plan and capture Naruto. The Junin initially didn't believe them until he showed them what appeared to be a glowing bone in his left arm. They seemed to trust him after that and followed him with all the genin present while we were asked to come tell you. Kin reported what she knew about what had occurred. Orochimaru's face paled slightly as he listened to what Kin had to say. He stood up and flipped over his desk without a second thought. Tsunade, Jiraiya. Get as many fucking people as you possibly can right now. We're off to war. And tell Ibiki to bring along some of the defectors. We're going to need everyone and everything we can get. Neither hesitated because they knew exactly what was going on and dashed off to summon their shinobi. Orochimaru turned to Kin and Zaku, his face emotionless as he gave them orders. You should both go tell Kyuubi and Gobi what's going on. They'll need to know, and we'll need every hand we can get. Orochimaru slid his hand through his hair before closing his eyes as he saw the two flee the room, knowing something big was about to happen. If this is actually happening, will we ever be able to do anything? When she first appeared in the hotel where they were staying, she walked into her room, pulled out her traveling cloak, and was about to leave when Kyuubi appeared behind her with a worried expression. Rayne, you and I both know that your luck will run out sooner or later. You are not meant to avert every major disaster that threatens the earth. Rayne clenched her fists tightly, only slightly turning her head so her emerald eyes were focused on him. She didn't want to deal with him right now. I'm not going to sit back and watch the world turn upside down again. If I die, I want to know that I did everything I could to save everyone else from the hell I've been through. Kyuubi closed his eyes and nodded, almost taking a step back from her conviction, knowing she'd do it sooner or later. Then I'm going with you whether you like it or not, he sighed. Is that correct? Rayne turned away from Kyuubi, a single tear streaming down her cheek. Then I apologize, my love. Rayne drove her left blade through Kyuubi's sternum before bringing her right hand and caressing his cheek before kissing him on the lips. Since Severin, you were the first to make me feel truly loved. But I usually do this by myself. She drew her right blade against his throat and slashed through, tears streaming freely as blood spurted from the fox's throat. Rayne turned to see Nibi and Yanbi, who were looking at her in fear at what they had just witnessed as he fell to the ground with a thud and heard a scream. His wounds should be healed by the time night falls. I have to leave. Rayne left the room, slipping into her cloak and covering her head, sickened by what she had just done. It had to be done, though. This was neither for him nor for anyone else. This was her sole responsibility. They had been cleaning for almost a week and were almost done. The rogue sound ninja were easy to deal with. They were simply difficult to locate and attacked when least expected. On a serious note, I fucking despise missing ninja. As the sand rolled off the now dead ninja and back into Gaara's gourd, Naruto yelled in frustration and ripped a kunai from his shoulder. At the very least, we're done with them. Yugito remarked as she watched Naruto's wound regenerate, briefly being hypnotized by it before recovering. Nearly all of the ninja who were planning to join the Leaf for a fresh start have already arrived, and we've eliminated the troublemakers and warmongers. Besides, you're only complaining because he hit you from behind, and you're not used to getting hit like that. Gaara continued smirking as Naruto glared daggers at him, unfazed by his friend's gaze. Not to mention that you've been in a foul mood lately. So, what's the matter with you? Naruto's initial reaction was to flick Gaara off and then say nothing. But that never worked against the damn sand user, and he was determined to solve the problem. He was even worse than Yugito. I'm not going to talk about it. Let's just say I have too much on my plate and leave it at that. While Gaara knew this to be true, he was tempted to leave it at that and leave Naruto alone. But something seemed off because he was normally very upbeat and hadn't been in the last few days, and he was curious as to why. As she approached Naruto, Yugito seemed to have an answer for him, perhaps because she felt she was the reason he had been acting strangely lately. Does it have to do with what Gobi and I talked about before we left? Naruto sighed and closed his eyes as he turned to Yugito, pleading with her to let him be. It's not just that. I admit that you two did not assist me at the time, but I can live with it for the time being. There are just a few things bothering me, and I've had a bad feeling since we left. Yugito winced at his words, realizing she was now a part of his problem. Even though she knew Gobi and her deal weren't the only things wrong with Naruto, it made her mood worse. Looking between the two and seeing that they were both in a bad mood, Gaara was at a loss for what to do. He knew that leaving Naruto alone would solve his problem because time seemed to be the only thing that could help him. However, Yugito would not feel better if she continued to act as she was. Gaara's first response was to entrap them in his sand until they kissed and reconciled. Unfortunately, that option resulted in him being mauled multiple times by the two. His next step was to wait it out and hope for the best. He could live with that for the time being, but if they don't start acting more like themselves. He frowned as he scanned the forest, turning his head as he heard something. He knew something was there even though he couldn't see it. He stopped moving, his eyes narrowed, and sand began to pour around him from his gourd. We've got company. Definitely not friendly. Naruto flicks his blades in place, sensing the same and preparing himself for combat, before growling because he couldn't see anything. Damn it. These guys are fantastic. They are not the same ninja we have been dealing with. Who could they possibly be? Yugito was abruptly cut off as she barely moved back to avoid being pierced in the chest by a kunai, her clothing ripped from the said weapon. Kisame dashed from the shrubbery behind Yugito, Samahata in full swing, descending towards his skull. Her eyes widened as she sensed his presence and realized she wouldn't be able to react because she was too caught up in the sudden attack. A blur of black and red flashed in front of Samahata, and Naruto's twin blades collided with the scale sword. The dhampir began to flow his energies into his arm to gather more strength to repel the blade, grinding his teeth as the strength behind the blade was far greater than he expected. But just then, a spear of earth flung straight for him, only to be cut off by a thin layer of sand just inches before it pierced his stomach. The sand didn't act as much a barrier because it pierced through it, but it gave Naruto enough time to slip beneath it as he activated his super speed and slipped to the side of Kisami's strike before jumping up and delivering a kick straight to the fishman's jawbone. Naruto was about to move in for the kill when he was forced to jump to the side as a man materialized beside him and a blade shot out from his cloak, almost stabbing him. Rolling away, surprised that the man ahead of him could keep up with him while using super speed, Naruto growled as he recognized the man. Madara Uchiha. What brings you and the other Akatsuki babes here? Watch your tongue, or I'll kill you right now. Fugoku growled as the other members waiting in the shadows gradually revealed their presence. When Naruto, Gaara, and Yugito saw the 7 in front of them, they were not optimistic about their chances. Fugoku, Kisame, the man known as Pain, Zetsu, and their 3 new recruits, Akanami Rikamaru, Kazekiri Rei, and Azuki Yugo, made the situation almost hopeless. Their only option was to carve a path to safety or hope that Rayne or Kyuubi were heading their way. Allow him to express himself. It makes no difference. Pain replied, his lone eye fixed on the 3 young teenagers, an eye patch covering the eye he'd lost in Deidara's explosion. I'd say you came to see Gaara. But something would tell me I was mistaken. Naruto snarled, forming a protective triangle with Gaara and Yugito. If I had to choose. Why are you here for me? I'm no longer a vessel. Smart kid. However, we no longer require the demons to succeed in our cause. All we need is your redhead mother. And having you is the best way to bring her to us. Madara responded to his question by tilting his head back at him. But I'm surprised you didn't rush over to us. I thought your connection with that vampire would have tipped you off to what was going on. I was convinced you would. Naruto's face was visibly flushed as a result of what he had just heard. Not only had they stated that their goal was to capture Rayne, but they had also. You got feral? She fought valiantly, but she had no chance against all of us. That is to be expected when 8 of the most powerful ninja on the planet band together and work as one. Akanami responded as he sat on the tree, his legs swaying in the breeze, looking down on the 3. Rikamaru, stop acting so tough. If you had been involved in the close-range battle, you would have been sliced into pieces. Rei responded, almost directly beneath the mentioned Akatsuki member, glaring daggers at him before returning her attention to the 3. Now you can make it easier on yourself by joining us. Or we can do it the fun way, with me cutting off all of your limbs. Kisame grinned, flashing his shark-like teeth as he slung his rebuilt Samahata over his shoulder, giddy at the prospect of ripping their arms and legs off with his sword. Naruto growled as he returned his gaze to Gaara and Yugito, cursing them and knowing his options were limited. He might be able to get out of this situation on his own if they weren't here. But there was only one way to get them out alive with them here. Yugito narrowed her eyes and backhanded Naruto after catching his gaze. Don't even consider it. We'll figure something out. We will not let them take you away from us. It appears that your comrades do not place a high value on their lives. I'm sorry, but I didn't want to shed your blood. I only desired Itachi's. Yugo stated as she drew her ninjutsu and prepared to strike at any moment. Naruto looked over at her, hissing from Yugito's hit, and was about to yell when Gaara intervened. I must concur. I'd rather die than fall into their hands. Even if you did go with them. What makes you think they'd spare us now that they've gotten what they wanted? You appear to have made your decision. We'll have to take you by force, I guess. Despite the fact that Naruto was willing to hand himself over to keep them safe, Madara shrugged his shoulders. Naruto held his left blade close to his right wrist to make the cut so he could quickly access his most powerful attack, growling as this was not going his way and there would be no stopping this conflict. That was the only way they could make a large enough escape route. No, no, no. Rikamaru quickly recognized this action and flung 3 kunais at the dhampir, a loud snap being heard from the speed they generated. Before they could even connect, Naruto emitted a large green shield that encircled not only him but also Gaara and Yugito, knocking the kunai back. I'll try to make a path for us to follow. It is our only chance, so prepare. Naruto leapt as his blade ripped through his wrist, and just as he was about to let it flood out, his eyes widened as he felt someone behind him. You're moving too slowly, boy. Naruto tried to release his attack before Madara grabbed his right wrist, barely able to reflect Yugo's ninjutsu. No, I don't believe so. I'm well aware of your and Rayne's attacks. Then brace yourself for this. Naruto yelled as another shield pushed both of them back before focusing his attention on Ray and Rikamaru. A violent wave of blood erupted from his wrist, but it quickly transformed into a roaring dragon as it soared towards the 2 unwitting Akatsuki members. Both jumped off the path as the bloody dragon ripped through the trees, decimating them on contact before turning and charging at the others who were trying to move and block the path. But, before it could, Madara appeared beside it and, with a single touch, the blood appeared to vanish, effectively ending their chances of escape. Naruto couldn't believe what he saw as he landed. The elderly Uchiha had used some sort of space-time jutsu and simply sent his dragon somewhere else, with the only cost being that his hand had been crippled by the blow as Madara flicked his hand, seeing that it wasn't functioning properly. He couldn't react quickly enough as Rei made her way behind him, her skin covered in a thin layer of rocks. However, Yugito gripped her wrist and growled as she drove her fist into her forehead, piercing through the armor and knocking the woman back. You are not going to touch him. Sand dashed towards the downed Rei, only to be blasted away as Pain jumped in her path, his hand outstretched to block Gaara's attack. Kunai began to rain down on Gaara, but his sand easily protected him before quickly tossing them aside to allow them to explode as each had a note attached to it. The only way we're going to get out of here alive is if we fight as one entity, protecting each other and combining our attacks. Naruto nodded as he prepared for the next attack as they backed into their defensive triangle once more, seeing both Gaara and Yugito step in for him. They didn't have to wait long as Kisame charged towards them, Fugoku flanking him as he performed the necessary seals before exhaling a massive dragon of pure fire. Naruto stepped aside as Yugito stood beside him, erecting yet another barrier to block the flames, before taking a deep breath and breathing a stream of blue flames just as he let down the shield. While Kisame swung his sword into the flames, absorbing the Yuki-filled flames, Fugoku cursed and was forced to jump above the attack before using a replacement to avoid the shards of sand. But Naruto was right by his side, drawing one of his blades into his arm before driving his knee into his gut. When Yugito advanced onto him, jumping over his blade and smashing her fist into his face, Kisame grunted and attempted to elbow Naruto back. Naruto attempted to drive his blades into the downed fish as he hit the ground before being knocked away by an invisible force. Gaara immediately lashed out with his sand at the Rinnegan wielder, causing the man to flee as Yugito knocked Samehada away and mounted Kisame, unleashing a barrage of punches into his face and chest when they weren't guarded. Naruto, on the other hand, knocked her off as a kunai nearly pierced her temple. Kisame rolled away as Yugo charged in with 2 shadow clones flanking her sides, the leaves shimmering for a moment around them. She charged straight at Yugito as she rose to her feet, and with no weapons, she would have difficulty avoiding her deceased fiancé's attack. But before she could reach him, sand lashed out from Gaara, but she easily knocked it away with a flick of her blade. That was a distraction, though, because the clones vanished in a flash of black and red before the same flash appeared behind her. Yugo flipped and floated over the dhampir, thrusting her blade down. Naruto countered with a single swipe of his blade, forming a Rasengan in his other hand and leaping towards her, attempting to ram the blast into her chest. However, a kunai struck the orb, dematerializing it before spikes of earth rose out towards Gaara and Yugito, forcing both to fly. As they fell for his attack, Akanami screamed out, "Fools! Now, succumb to my trap." All of the kunai he'd been throwing shot up into the air, connected to some sort of nearly invisible razor wire, and formed a deadly web above and below them. Gaara reacted quickly and destroyed the sand below, but that was the least of their problems as an unknown force grabbed the web above and pulled it down towards them. But before it could reach them, a single being wielding 2 katanas leapt in front of it, shredding the wires in an instant. Naruto's eyes widened as he recognized the person responsible for the web's destruction. Daisuke. Daisuke grinned as he landed next to him and held out his 2 blades towards the Akatsuki. "Uzumaki, I owed you a favor for clearing my mind. You saved my life, and I will be damned if someone takes yours before I can thank you. Goddamn you, kid. Move out of the way." Fugoku yelled as his katanas were pointed at him, and he took offense as he went through hand seals before chirping caught his attention. The next thing he knew, he was forced to back up as Sasuke leapt ahead of him, his palm filled with electricity and anger written on his face. "You will not approach him or my friends again. You're not going to take anything else from me." Fugoku was stunned to see his youngest son standing before him, and he barely had time to react before grabbing the boy's wrist and preventing such a pathetic death. "I'm not sure why you're here. But you're getting in my way, son." A wildly spinning Kiba in his piercing fang collided with him before he could do anything else, breaking his grip on Sasuke and knocking him back. Kiba grinned as he landed next to Sasuke. "It appears that I saved your ass, Uchiha. What the fuck are these kids up to? Rikamaru, if you were jacking off again instead of keeping an eye out." Ray yelled angrily before shaking her rocky fist in the general direction of the Akanami. "I had no idea. Outside of this damn mist rolling in the thicket of godforsaken bugs and trees, I can't see shit." As a slow mist began to roll in, Rikamaru responded, giving away his position, while Sasuke and Kiba backed up to Naruto's small force. Naruto returned his attention to the Akatsuki members in front of him, glaring at the 2 before simply giving Daisuke a dirty look. "Daisuke, Kiba, and Sasuke. I'm going to kick all 3 of your asses if we make it through this. You have absolutely no idea how tough these guys are. Well, if it's any consolation, we did bring reinforcements." Sasuke commented blandly, giving Naruto a brief glare before putting aside his annoyance at being chastised for coming to help them. "How did you know we were in trouble?" Yugito inquired as the Akatsuki appeared to have paused their assault to investigate what had happened after one of their eyes had been blinded. Kiba grinned as the mist completely covered the area, allowing them to see their opponents. "Well, we came because a very hot girl told us you were going to be in trouble. Madara. We're in trouble. Momochi and several Konoha genin and Junin have arrived." Zetsu responded as he emerged from the ground, looking surprised by the unexpected turn of events. He shook his head, frowning beneath his mask. "It makes no difference. We can still take care of them, and we'll bring Rayne out with the boy. Attack now." As soon as he said those words, he was forced to move as a massive blur of green decimated the ground where he had been standing seconds before. And at that precise moment, another green blur appeared in front of him, forcing him to fade out of existence in order to avoid being pulverized. Madara tilted his head awkwardly away from them as a loud and boisterous voice yelled from the cratered ground. "I am the Azure Beast of Konoha, and I have come to save the day and demonstrate the brilliance of the youth. I am the Green Beast of Konoha, and I have come to assist my master and protect a good friend." Lee declared as he stood beside his master, the blur that nearly hit Madara in the air. Aside from the beast's appearance, Yugo was the first to act, slashing her blade towards the group of teenagers. An ethereal wave suddenly slashed towards them. Gaara's sand rose and deflected the blow before Naruto leapt over it, his Yuki pulsed into his twin blades. Two people can play it this way. An X-shaped wave flashed from his blades, directly towards Yugo, who ducked and rolled before racing towards the airborne blonde. She didn't make it because her ninjutsu collided with a single trench knife. Yugo, how have you fallen? I'll make sure you get to him. You're fucked, Asuma. Yugo roared as she pushed him back with all her strength, only to be knocked back by Asuma, who used the force of her push to drive his leg into her chest. He didn't have time for another attack as Kisame slashed down with his sword, forcing him to roll away from the blow because he was certain being cleaved in two would kill him. When he brought his trench knife to the large man's leg, it was deflected by a kunai coated in wind. He jumped back, cursing himself for not expecting that, only to realize the length of Samahata was too great. It never reached him because a blade of equal size met it and was blocked by a single warrior wearing a tilted mist headband with a scratch through it. Konoha ninja, you're a jerk. This huge fuck is all mine. Hello, Zabuza. Kisame grinned as he looked down to see his old comrade standing in front of him. It's too bad you couldn't join us. But I think I'll prefer this. I was always curious as to which of us was truly the best. That's correct, Fishface. That was the main reason I didn't join your pitiful organization. Aside from that, I didn't like the sound of world dominance. That doesn't have a good ring to it. Zabuza grinned as he looked up at Kisame, glad he'd get to cut the big guy up before the end. Naruto. Before the said ninja appeared through a mirror that formed directly behind the blonde, Haku's voice echoed. Is everyone okay here? Are there any injuries? I can't think of any. But what the hell is the point? What brought you all together, and how did you know this was going to happen? Naruto yelled out as Fugoku and Ray charged towards them, surrounded by a swarm of bugs. Fugoku burned them to ashes, and Ray charged forward, ripping a large chunk of earth from the ground and tossing it at them. A wall of mirrors formed in front of Naruto, and the two shattered on impact, allowing Naruto to form his barrier. We'd been following them to figure out what they were up to, and we finally figured it out when they captured that vampire, and we knew they'd come after you next, so we came here to help you. Get some reinforcements as well. Simply fantastic. Incoming. Gaara remarked dryly before his sand walled off the onslaught of kunai, only to be shocked as they pierced through. Yugito dragged him out of the way just in time, but one of them struck and pierced his thigh. He ripped it out and growled as Shukaku didn't heal him quickly, glaring at those around him. We now have more than enough people. We must go on the offensive to drive them away. I concur. Naruto responded quickly before calculating his options, counting the other genin waiting for their chance to join in. Take Yugito, Daisuke, and Haku to attack your father, Sasuke. Keep an eye out for Amaterasu and never look him in the eyes, or you'll be gone in an instant. Gaara, you and I are going to take on the rock chick. And please tell Shino and them to track down the plant fucker who has been draining our energy. Didn't you forget about me? Pain stated as he stood in front of them, grinning and straightening his hand at Naruto. Oh fuck. Was all he could say as he was flung back and skidded and skipped across the ground. Naruto stood up, growling as he picked himself up, his eyes narrowing as he watched Sasuke try to engage him in hand-to-hand combat before knocking him away and blasting Daisuke and Yugito away from them. Naruto used stop time to get as close to pain as possible before releasing it and driving his blade into the man's gut. Pain let out a gasp of air before growling as he focused the gravity around him and pushed the blonde and others away from him, creating a crater beneath him while remaining afloat above it. Naruto, regaining his footing, grinned at this development. Change of strategy. Take Gaara and Daisuke to deal with your father, Sasuke. You and Haku, Yugito, will have to deal with the rock bitch. This one belongs to me. I'm not a babe. Ray countered and attempted to attack Naruto, but a mirror deflected her blow as a swarm of others formed around her, encircling her in a half-sphere. As Yugito stepped outside the semi-globe of mirrors, Haku's image appeared in the nearest mirror as he slid into it. Notify me when a window for me to attack opens up. I doubt you'll be able to defeat someone of her caliber on your own. Let's investigate. As his image began to multiply within his mirrors, Haku grinned at the challenge. Ray sensed something was wrong and tried to flee when Haku launched his assault, moving mirror to mirror as he pelted her with Senbon. It didn't matter because her armor could handle it, and even if it started to chip away, she could rebuild it because there were always plenty of minerals nearby. Surprised by her speed and armor, Haku immediately called out for Yugito's assistance, knowing he couldn't stop her from leaving. She's running away. Reintroduce her. You have it. Yugito sped up to catch up with the X-Rock ninja, stopping her just before she got outside. However, as she attempted to strike her, Ray moved slightly, causing her blow to miss before driving her fist into Yugito's gut before grabbing Yugito's visible cat ear and slamming her face into the mirror. Haku jumped out of the other mirror just as the moment arrived and drove a Senbon into the back of her neck. It pierced the soft stone armor but didn't do enough damage as Ray twirled around and tried to catch him off guard with a haymaker, but Haku ducked beneath it and placed his hands on her stomach before she was blasted back by a rapid saturation of her armor before it froze and shattered with some applied force. But Ray simply slammed back into the mirror and bounced off it before Yugito grabbed her ankles with her tail and tossed her back into the semi-sphere with a single flick before following with a burst of blue flames to try and break the rest of her armor as Haku remerged with his mirrors and was ready to launch another assault. Ray couldn't move as the flames died around her, her rock armor flaking off as she rose slowly. A dangerous glint came from her aquamarine eyes as the two younger girls beat her, the youngest woman to ever be declared an S-rank shinobi, before she screamed out and her chakra exploded around her. You will not be able to defeat me. Hundreds of spears erupted from the ground and surrounded her, obliterating the semi-sphere of mirrors. Haku and Yugito had no idea what had hit them. One ripped through the right side of Haku's collarbone, followed by another grazing his left forearm and yet another piercing his stomach and knocking him back. Yugito was struck dead center in the chest as it passed through, followed by another graze on her right leg and deflected by a swirling sphere of chakra. Kaiten. As the barrage of spears came to an end, Neji looked back to see how the two were before grimacing. Sorry for the delay. Kurenai told me to come help because she deals with their sniper and genjutsu expert, and I saw you needed it the most. Never mind. Haku growled as he cut off the part of the spear that didn't pierce his flesh before looking over at Yugito and seeing her crying out as her spear had landed in a more critical area. We need to get this done quickly so I can tend to her. She's not going to last much longer. Neji simply nodded and took his stance, staring down Ray as her stone armor reformed. Then I'll call it a day. You dumb brat. Fugoku screamed, drawing a lot of attention as Daisuke grabbed his armor and nearly slashed it off with his katana before knocking the kid back. Do you have parts of Beliar in you? God forbid. That explains your speed and strength. Jumping back as Sasuke ran to his side, the first thrown to his father's face in a feint as he went to stab the other kunai into his hip to impede his movement as he was beating them with his speed and experience. Fugoku, on the other hand, saw this and caught the thrown kunai and attempted to drive it down into his son's back, only to find his arm frozen as sand wrapped around his shoulder. As Sasuke delivered the kunai on target, he kicked his boy away before blasting the sand of his shoulder with a concentrated chakra burst. But then Daisuke was on him, and he had to use the kunai to deflect his flurry of katana slashes, all while dealing with the constant rain of sand around him. To make matters worse, Gaara was engaging him as the Shukaku vessel emerged from the sand that was now filling the forest, complementing Daisuke's slashes with his own. Fugoku was becoming irritated by these two as his Sharingan kept him one step ahead of them, and as Sasuke began to charge for a Chidori, he knew he had to end this now. He pushed Daisuke into Gaara before jumping back as his eyes slowly morphed into a new form, seeing a small opening. I didn't think I'd have to use this on kids like you. However, you are physically fit for your age. But now is the time for you to go. Emote. He was unable to complete his attack. Pain slammed into him, slashing and cutting him. Naruto took a step forward, not looking great and heavily panting despite discovering the weakness in his attack. He was having difficulty getting around that one fucking attack and kept getting blasted by it. Now, Fugoku. You wouldn't want to waste that on them, would you? Isn't it true that I'm not your main target? Fugoku growled as he tossed pain aside, pissed the man was bleeding all over him, as the demon spawn stepped forward, looking as cocky as ever. I plan to use it against them. But now that you've offered yourself, this is more than enough. Madara yelled as he stood in the middle of the fighting, Yugito dangling from the back of her shirt collar in his left hand. You all call yourselves Akatsuki members. All I see is a group of grown men and women battling children and their teachers. Nobody among you is worthy of the title of warrior. You are all insignificant. You have all disappointed me, so you will all perish when I summon Beliar. Madara grumbled before turning to Naruto and mockingly holding up Yugito. As for you, if you want to save this girl, come to my base with your mother. Naruto tried to sneak up behind him, but Madara knocked him back with a single kick, sending him skidding. It's not too far away, so you shouldn't have any trouble getting there. But I recommend that you hurry. She won't be able to stop bleeding for long. With nothing else to say, he dispersed into an orange swirl similar to his mask. Naruto's entire body began to tremble as the combat slowly began to die down, no one wanting to continue after hearing what had been said. Fugoku was the first to speak up, spitting angrily and preparing to march to the base to extract Madara himself. I could be a lot of things, but worthless is not one of them. That jerk will pee. He was stunned as Sasuke used Chidori to pierce his hand through his heart, his eyes narrowing as he looked up at his father's shocked expression. He won't have the opportunity to murder you. You took everything from me, and I will damn you if you cause any more harm to anyone else. This is the end of the story. Sasuke's three tomo slowly began to morph as his father fell to his knees, and once he heard the thud of his collapsed body, his eyes had fully morphed into a 6-point Mangekyo before he looked down at the corpse before moving straight to Naruto. We must go after him. We cannot allow him to carry out his plans.
Naruto didn't respond as he remained motionless, his eyes flickering with fear.
As soon as he saw this, Sasuke slammed his fist into his temple, knocking the blonde to the ground, before reaching down and grabbing his collar, lifting him up and staring him down. Get out of here. Isn't she one of the people you fight for? You're going to let her die if you don't fix it right now. Something seemed to register in Naruto as soon as he said that. However, what it was caught Sasuke off guard when he was suddenly whisked away and found himself in the grip of his brother. Shit. Not right now. Naruto, calm down. Naruto stood in the center, his entire body rigid as the power coursed through his very being, his skin turning a deep gray coated with a thin layer of slime. As his face began to change before their eyes, everything nearby was blown away and torn from the ground. As his body was quickly covered in a layer of fine fur, his features became more canine by the second. As two large, leathery wings with fur on the backside ripped through his upper clothing, his muscles began to bulge and reform. His lower half was taken care of as 8 tails ripped through it. As his transformation was complete, the oppressive mist of energy dissipated and he sniffed the ground. He seemed to have found what he was looking for and took off with a great burst of wind, blazing to the north, hell-bent on catching the one who had stolen his Neko. Kiba was the most vocal as soon as he left, yelling. What in the blazes was that? I've never seen or heard anything like it. That is Naruto's fully transformed state. His demonic and vampiric natures mingled. Itachi said as he followed the trail Naruto appeared to be leaving behind him. This is the 3rd time he has summoned it because it requires not only both sides to cooperate, but also for him and his dark side half to agree on one single thing. And I'm guessing it'll be to save Yugito. So, then. What the hell are we doing here? Let's get started. He will require all of our assistance. Gaara declared as he took a step forward and began to follow Naruto's path, remembering what was said earlier when they were ambushed. Damn it, he is correct. With him charging straight at him, there's no doubt that Dhampir Chick will follow, and he'll use her energy to activate Beliar's heart. And if that occurs, we're all gone. Pain groaned as he rose from the ground and ripped off his Akatsuki cloak. Oh my god. Orochimaru said this alongside a now-healed Kyuubi, Tsunade, Jiraiya, and almost every able-bodied shinobi Konoha possessed. Rayne has already set out to stop him. She had no idea he was the object of her desire. No, she was aware. Kyuubi responded by looking off into the distance and removing his open shirt. She knew it was her he desired, so she pursued him, intending to end this on her terms. But I believe she was aware that she would fail this time. Everyone stood quietly, taking in everything that had been said. Could the end of the world happen tonight? Rikamaru grinned as he threw his Akatsuki cloak away as the silence became deafening. Okay, that's all. Anyone want to join me as I go out with a bang? Ray took a step forward, tossed her ripped cloak down, and nodded beside Rikamaru. I'll be there for you until the end. I promise to stick by you until the end of time. Please include me. Kisame grinned as he tossed off his cloak and looked over at Zabuza. Sorry, old friend, but I believe this is more important than our little feud. It was a pleasure to know you. You're a jerk. I'll accompany you. I'm not going to let you take all the credit. Zabuza spoke up before slipping his head-cleaving sword behind him. I believe everyone feels the same way. Kyuubi stated as his eyes turned a deep crimson and his expression became more feral. Anyone who wants to leave, all the injured who need to heal, and anyone who doesn't want to die yet, get as far away as you can. We're fighting death tonight. Madara sighed as he placed the unconscious girl next to the chained vampire in his lair. That had not gone as planned, but none had so far, so he should have expected something like that. Nonetheless, he needed to prepare because he knew an entire army of shinobi was about to descend on this location. It took you a long time to get here. I've been standing here for hours. Rayne spoke as she stepped out of the shadows with her blades open, her 2 different colored eyes gleaming. Rayne's sudden appearance startled Madara for a moment. Despite this, he didn't bother turning to face her as he removed his mask. I should have figured you'd already been here. Are you having a bad day, my love? Rayne said as she approached him as he moved his mask to the altar of Beliar's heart, acting as she used to when he came home. This location has hardly changed. I should have guessed this was where you were stationed. After all, this was our old house. Could you please stop taunting me? I've had a difficult day. Let's just get this over with. Madara stated as he finally turned around, his face withered, rotting flesh and bones clearly visible. Madara, what is your true plan? I'm fairly certain that killing you isn't part of the plan. Rayne spoke as Madara knelt before her, his head bowed as if ready to be executed. He simply shook his head and closed his eyes, a slight smile on his face as if everything was about to end. You'll see soon enough. Kill me now. This life has become far too long for me. Rayne sensed something was off about this. Everything seemed wrong. Madara, she knew, was never like this, always confident and ready to do whatever was required. But to give up his life in this manner. He wasn't the type to give up. Hurry, or else I'll carry out my plan, and not only will your son perish, but so will everyone else you're trying to protect. Madara screamed as he lunged at her, almost like a zombie ready to bite into her flesh. Rayne quickly beheaded him with a single swipe, against her better judgment. His body sank to his knees, and his head appeared to float slowly towards the ground. Thank you very much, my love. And you live in the hellish nightmare I imagined. Your energy, like mine, belongs to Beliar. As his blood splattered onto the floor, ancient runes began to spread throughout the room, coating every single inch before converged right beneath her. She tried to cry, but nothing came out of her mouth. Instead, Rayne's screams and a dark, evil laughter that seemed to grow louder and louder filled their old home. Rayne fell to her knees, her throat ragged from screaming, and her eyes began to glisten with fear as the being she had faced so long ago replaced Madara's deceased body. Beliar stood in front of her, and this time, she wasn't sure she'd be able to stop him. It's you again. I see things are different this time, the eerie being said as he looked down at the red-haired dhampir, bending over to keep its head from tearing through the roof. Then it's time for me to finish what I started. Give me my eye. His massive hand swung down at Rayne and ripped through the ground. But before Beliar knew it, a shell of what appeared to be blood had connected into his red rib cage and erupted in flames. Stumbling back and howling from the pain, ripping his head through the ceiling in the process, he turned to see the dhampir standing before him, her dragons firmly grasped in her grasp. I may not be at full strength, but I'll be damned if I let you go free quietly. Rayne screamed, her eyes glowing brightly as what little energy she had left filled her entire being. She leapt towards him, switching to her regular ammo to reduce the amount of blood wasted as she fired straight at his chest, aiming for the heart as the only way to stop him now. He swatted at her, but she pushed herself into the air, punching through the ceiling, with a simple push against his hand. Beliar simply stood up and tore through the ceiling as he continued to grow at an unhealthy rate. Rayne had anticipated this and had dove straight to his chest, fitting her dragons between his ribs and beginning to pelt his heart with her remaining ammunition. He swung his right, howling in pain, to crush Rayne to his chest, but she saw it coming. She slipped her dragons into their holsters, out of ammunition for the time being. She flicked her blades forward and tore through his fleshy bone wrist. She grinned as she landed on the handless arm, as if she could finish him off on her own this time. The hand she had ripped off simply reattached to his wrist before he flicked her up into the air, much to her horror. Rayne attempted to right herself and prepare for an attack as she began to drop when Beliar's left hand swung forward and caught her with the back of his hand, slamming her through the roof and down into the cell Madara had arrived in earlier. Rayne began to pick herself up, groaning as that rather hurt, when a familiar voice caught her attention. How about you get me out of these fucking chains, bitch?
Rayne turned to face her half-sister, who was chained to the cell wall, and drove her blades through the chains to free Feral.
When the full-fledged vampire was released, she slashed her own shackles with her claws before growling at Beliar. Well, this isn't going to be any fun. As he grows bigger, more of his power is released. Fucking perfect. At least you didn't have to fight him before. Rayne grumbled before looking down and seeing Yugito unconscious on the floor, blood pouring from the wound in her chest. You're not going to do that. You're going to take Yugito and get her out of here. What the fuck? Are you ordering me to? Why in the hell would I do that? Why don't you just use her for those damn pistol things there so you can finish this fight quickly? Farrell roared ferociously, knowing the girl's time was coming to an end and believing she should be put to good use. I'm sure you can see why we shouldn't do that, Rayne said as she drew her guns from her holster and pushed the spikes on the front of them into her armpits, draining her own blood into them. If he knows she's in one of our hands, he won't hesitate for a second and will come straight here to help in this fight. If we let her die, we'll have both Beliar and Naruto to deal with, and I don't like our odds even without him. Farrell cursed as she sensed the distinct energy pattern that belonged to the Hanyu Dhampir approaching and knew Rayne was dead on. It was during their fight that he summoned that form against her and bound their souls together the way they were now. Farrell snarled as she looked down at her half-breed sister, carefully lifting the girl onto her shoulder, disliking this because she still thought of the blonde as food. You better not fucking die. We still owe you one. Rayne's eyes widened as she drew her dragon's spines from within her before aiming them straight at Beliar. Holy sh**t. Farrell and Rayne both jumped to the side, just in time to avoid being stomped flat by the growing giant's foot. The Dhampir did not hesitate any longer, leaping onto his leg and racing up onto his body. She ducked under the attempted swat, grabbed his arm, and used the opportunity to flip herself further into the air to get a clear shot of his chest. Rayne grinned as she focused her blood grenades on Beliar's eye and zoomed in on his heart, giving her a near-perfect shot before she began to unload her payload. Before the final one connected, grenade after grenade impacted Beliar's heart, knocking the giant being back and onto his heels. The enormous being roared as he fell to the ground, and Rayne stood there watching him crush their old home into rubble. Rayne flicked her blades forward as she grinned triumphantly as she placed her guns into their holsters because she had no more ammo and giving them any more of her blood would be unwise. Did I catch him? Her hopes and dreams were dashed as a loud, echoing laugh rumbled from the earth and at least 100 glowing red bones ripped through the rubble and began floating above. Ha ha ha, Dhampir, you've grown very strong, but all that strength is meaningless now that I'm nearly whole. The pieces began to fall one by one and strike the ground where Beliar had fallen. Before it happened, the entire area began to tremor violently as trees were pulled out of the ground, boulders began to shatter, and the earth itself began to crack. Beliar ripped through the rubble and stood over Rayne by several hundred meters. As he looked down at the insignificant Dhampir, his shrill laugh grew louder. So, what will you do now, little girl? My power is limitless. Farrell came to a complete halt as the ground beneath her began to violently tremble and she struggled to maintain her balance. Even with her limited balance, she had to start avoiding trees collapsing on her, which she found relatively simple once she was in the air. When she landed again, the tremors became more intense, and she was forced to bend down and drive her free claw into the ground to avoid being knocked over. What the fuck is going on? The entire world seems to be shaking. Then there was a loud, echoing roar that nearly deafened her, forcing her to drop Yugito just to cover her ears. It didn't help that the said girl couldn't block out the noise and began to scream unconsciously as her eardrums nearly burst. The near-earth shattering roar finally subsided, allowing Farrell to uncover her ears and pant. Damn it. I can't just stand back and watch this, son of. Did that creature just truly resurrect? At that moment, another roar drew her attention away from the destroyed forest, and a familiar figure landed in front of her, snarling angrily. Farrell almost screamed in frustration, but she held her pose and spoke calmly as she stepped away from Yugito. Boy, I truly hope you realize I'm not the one you should be concerned about right now. The transformed Naruto just continued to growl as it took a step towards Feral, seemingly unconcerned whether she was friend or foe. But Yugito's scent changed his course, and he took a few steps in her direction before sniffing her to check her condition. He clearly didn't like what he smelled, as he roared and turned to face Feral, seemingly ready to lunge. "Stop right now. I have nothing to do with this and I'm just trying to get her to safety, damn it." Feral snarled back at the vampiric demon, pacing from side to side in case he couldn't understand her. "The real threat is over there, killing your other mother. If you don't hurry, you'll lose her as well." Nothing seemed to deter him from his goal, which irritated Feral because she didn't want to deal with this form of his again, but then another earth-shattering roar came from the direction Beliar had been resurrected from. That one act captivated Naruto, and he leapt into the air and streaked towards the summoned god without hesitation. Feral almost sighed in relief as she looked down at the blonde Hanyu before groaning, knowing she had no choice but to get her out of here now. Lifting her onto her shoulder, the vampire sensed more people heading this way and began to rush south. She'd dump herself on them so she could fight the damned god. And then almost likely die. Rayne panted heavily as she hid behind a pile of fallen trees, wiping the blood from her brow. This was the end of her. She couldn't do anything else but draw its attention. He'd only had one hit, but that hit. All of the bones in her right arm had completely shattered, all of her ribs on that side had snapped, and she was pretty sure her head had been fractured, not to mention she could feel she was internally bleeding from the punctured organs and had no way of undoing the damage. Of all the ways for a vampire to go. Rayne laughed silently at her own condition, her vision blurring briefly before shaking her head. "I'm going to die of blood loss. How ironic." Sighing, she didn't want this to end this way. All she ever wanted was to be with the one she loved and have her own family. That dream could never be realized now. The apocalypse had officially begun. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she realized she had failed not only everyone, but also the people she cared about the most. "Naruto, I couldn't keep you from experiencing the same life I did. Please forgive me for failing you. Kyuubi, my love. I am so sorry. I never wanted it to end like that for us." At that precise moment, one of Beliar's hands ripped through the trees and grabbed Rayne, crushing her other arm in the process. Beliar yelled again as he lifted her to his face, the vampire no longer struggling. "Now that you've accepted your fate, I believe you have something of mine." More pain was the last thing Rayne needed, but it was what she felt as her left eye, Beliar's eye, began to glow. She screamed as it burned her socket as it was slowly dragged out by Beliar's will and ripped out with a sickening plop. And as soon as it was released, it turned into a flash and was absorbed into the god's left eye socket before forming a massive red eye. "Ah, it's so nice to be able to see again instead of having to feel," Beliar exclaimed, before his lone eye looked at Rayne and growled in disgust. "Dhampir, you are a hideous abomination, so I will give you what you deserve." Beliar screamed in agony as his hand was ripped off again, and Rayne fell to the ground, only to be caught on the back of a yellow blur. Turned Naruto skidded across the ground, rolling Rayne off his back before growling deeply at her, as if trying to communicate with her. Of course, she had no idea what the growls meant as she lay helpless on the ground, her only strength being to turn her emerald gaze towards him. "Naruto. Run. There's nothing we can do now. He's nearly at full strength." Naruto didn't seem to like that response and decided to disregard it because he understood her perfectly. He formed his orb shield without warning as Beliar attempted to smash them with his fist. The barrier strained against the blow's force, and the shield's energy began to flicker uncontrollably, but it held as Beliar removed his fist. "Impressive. You might just be worthy of being my opposition for the time being," Beliar exclaimed as he looked down at the small creature but saw a formidable opponent. I haven't been challenged since God himself came down to deal with me. I hope you don't fall short of my expectations. Naruto jumped into the air, growling, as a greenish hue formed around him. The summoned god reacted by swatting at the dual breed, but the surrounding energy acted like thousands of blades, tearing through his hand and arm and continuing towards his chest. But with a simple step to the side, he completely missed the aura and was forced to release it as he turned before reforming it. Beliar realized this as his arm regenerated. Once the attack was in motion, he couldn't even change directions without dropping it, even though the attack may have rendered him invulnerable, but it was pointless if the opponent was faster. He didn't even bother trying to swat him away this time, instead jumping to the side and placing his hands against each other, forming a malevolent crimson energy in the center. When the dual breed released his attack, a bolt of energy ripped from Beliar and enveloped the small being for a split second before exploding from the contact. But, seemingly unscathed, the turned Naruto burst from the smoke before stopping in midair, gathering his own energy at the tip of his muzzle. For a brief moment, the air seemed to still before he finally unleashed the beam, which rippled around it as it headed straight towards the earthbound god. The speed of the beam left little room for movement, but Beliar managed to keep the blow from hitting his only vulnerable spot. Instead, it pierced through his right shoulder, effectively disarming him, and then dissipated in the distance. However, the arm quickly reattached itself, as if the attack had never occurred. Naruto roared in rage before flying straight towards him, the air shimmering as if he had cut through it. But Beliar stopped him as a crimson barrier appeared in front of him, catching him off guard as it reflected him before her. He roared in pain as the summoned god smashed him into the ground and firmly held him. This is the end of this. While your power is underdeveloped, it is too dangerous for me to keep you alive any longer. Beliar yelled before squeezing the dual breed in his grip. Naruto's wings began to glow violently as he screamed in pain, gradually sharpening. The fingers were sliced into hundreds of pieces with a quick flick before he drove his front claws into the god's palm and shredded it. He jumped off his wrist and straight to Beliar's face, his claws coated in his aura and luminously shining. Beliar screamed in agony as the dual breed ripped his radiant claws through his throat before springing downward to his rib cage and cutting through to reach his heart. He was about to form another blast within his muzzle when he was flung back by the stumped hand. "I'm tired of this," Beliar exclaimed as he began to direct his seemingly endless supply of energy toward each of the spikes on his collarbone. Each bolt smashed into the turned Naruto, pushing him further back and burning the fur off his body before another struck him. And each shot drained his very being, draining his vampiric, demonic, and human energies until all that remained was his naked form. Naruto was then driven into the decimated forest by one final blast before Beliar began to yell in triumph. "Nothing can stop me. This world will be mine just as it was before. The hell it will." A ferocious roar echoed before a nine-tailed fox leapt from behind him, claws first, into his lower back. Beliar stumbled forward as Kyuubi ripped his claws into the beast's back, roaring as he slammed his fist into the beast's side. The fox roared right back, rolling onto his feet as the ground began to rip apart as his yuki exuded from his very being. Then he lunged at him again, only to be caught in his grasp. But as soon as he did, he was knocked down by a demonic dog that crashed into his knees. This freed Kyuubi from his grip, and he went straight to his chest, slashing madly at it while using his tails to keep his hands from easily restraining him. Gobi quickly joined the assault in a similar manner, taking their respective sides. Rayne couldn't believe what she was seeing as she stood there in awe and horror. Naruto had stayed with Beliar, possibly weakening him as Kyuubi and Gobi arrived to pick up where he had left off. And then she felt something she'd never felt before from the entity. His power was dwindling. Is it possible we can win? Rayne pondered as she attempted to lift herself using only her legs. If it was truly possible, she wasn't going to lie down and let any chance of survival slip away. Rayne. Don't move. I'll take care of your wounds. She heard the timid Yanbi's voice, which surprised her given the Four Tails' difficulty with blood loss. Rayne's entire body trembled as she felt the warmth of her energy begin to flow into her. Take care of my arms. I'll take care of the rest of my injuries. But why? I can heal you in no time, Yanbi responded, looking at Rayne strangely, trying only to pay attention to her as she would panic if she realized what was going on. The earth shook as Beliar reached out and grabbed both the 9 and 5 tails by their throats before smashing them together and tossing them aside like dolls before standing back up. Is every power being going to challenge my rule tonight? Rayne's eyes welled up with tears as she watched Kyuubi leap to his feet and begin to gather his Yuki at his muzzle, a technique Naruto had no doubt learned from him, only to be swatted away and before Beliar drove his foot into the kitsune's gut. The actions of two small beings, whom she immediately recognized as Feral and Itachi, were the only thing that kept him from being crushed. Yanbi, pay attention. Rayne tried to lift herself, catching the lizard demon off guard with her desperate cry. Damn it. We need everyone with power and those without it to fight him. If we don't stop him here, everything will be destroyed and taken from us. There will be no one to care about as Kyuubi, Naruto, Itachi, Nibi, and her child. They will all perish. He will spare no one who can stand against him. Yanbi's entire being froze in fear as she heard something she didn't want or need to hear. But she was unable to fight. She possessed no useful power. All she could do was heal and create barriers. She was incapable of doing anything else. Rayne found the strength to lash out at her, grabbing her by the throat, as she could sense the lizard struggling to come to terms with what she said. God damn it, you've forgotten everything, haven't you? You have power that can rival and surpass Kyuubi or even myself if you focus on it. Why do you think I made you my top priority to recover and sent Itachi to retrieve you back then? You were the bane of vampiric and demonic existence when the shroud enveloped the world. You were man's final attempt to create a god to stop us, and you would have succeeded if the Rakuto sage hadn't found Beliar heart and realized that he had to seal it away with the strongest beings. Now remember the power you store within and bring it out. Rayne screamed at Yanbi, oblivious to the fact that she was mortally injured and shouldn't be able to move at all. Rayne's words didn't seem to have the desired effect, as Yanbi was now terrified and appeared to be about to pass out. She would have screamed in frustration because there seemed to be no way to get the girl to fight when she noticed her eyes had turned pure white and an eerie bluish hue had begun to coat her being. Beliar yelled as the tiny vampire seemed to pack a punch and rip through his limbs at breakneck speed. Not to mention that the Hanyu was causing significant damage because he couldn't catch the damn bastard and was burning through and ripping his own pieces, forcing him to recover them. Beliar slammed his hands together as he snatched both when they were in the air, attempting to close in on his chest to finish him. Both screamed in agony before he threw them to the ground, only to restart his battle with the damn kitsune and dog demon. Tossing them both aside, he almost slipped as the ground beneath him became extremely slick and began to burn. Before he could take a step away from the acid, a massive snake wrapped itself around both of his legs, stealing the rest of his balance and slithering away. A giant grunt was heard as soon as the thud was heard, followed by a huge toad with a man on top of its head breathing fire into the oil the toad spat out. The flames ignited Beliar's entire being, and seeing that he was down, neither Kyuubi nor Gobi wasted any time in unleashing their most powerful attacks, Gobi returning to her normal state and using Tetsaiga and Kyuubi using a charge Yuki blast. Both struck the core of his being, resulting in a loud, screeching howl. To their surprise and horror, A film of red energy lifted the flames and energy blasts from Beliar's body as he stood before his targets once more. You're all becoming annoyances. I'll finish this right now. Tensai Chibaku. Everyone except Beliar leapt away from the area, leaving the god perplexed. As the ground itself crumbled, a microscopic black hole began to rise above it. And its tremendous gravitational pull drew the very earth Beliar was standing onto it, ripping the ground apart in the process. Beliar screamed in outrage at what was happening, struggling against the pull and finding it difficult to take a step forward. How did you humans come to wield such power? Only the gods have this kind of power. I'm not sure how we possess. But I know why. Pain declared as he stood in front of the army gathered to fight Beliar. My ancestor unleashed humanity's untapped potential so that we could compete with demons and vampires and stand on our own, ushering in the dawn of man. We will not let this generation fall like the last. Beliar could no longer stand on his own and was drawn into the moon that was forming in front of everyone's eyes, drawing him to the moon's core. Pain panted heavily as he gazed up at the moon, falling to his knees as that had drained almost every last bit of power he possessed. You know, everyone prepare any and all ranged attacks. Try to hit the heart. Everything else will regenerate, so that is the only way to take this big fuck down. Rikamaru cried out, standing by Rei's side, as he focused his dujutsu on the location where he felt the god's presence. Are you not going to take cover and attack? I mean, that's not something you see every day. Rei grinned as she needed to get one last shot at her husband because this could be the last time they saw each other. What exactly is the point? Why should we cower and hide from the end of life as we know it? Either embrace it or face it. Those should be your only two options, and I chose the second. Akanami grinned as he responded to his wife. Besides, I have faith in the afterlife. When I die, I'll fly to heaven, while you'll be stuck in purgatory because you don't believe in either heaven or hell. Damn you, Christian. Rei mumbled before preparing her attack, ignoring the fact that some, if not a large number, of shinobi were staring at them as if they were insane as hundreds of earthen spears formed around her. Just be my eyes and point me in the right direction. Then prepare. He's on the verge of breaking free. Pain growled at the two, puzzled as to why he had convinced Madara to recruit them. They were certainly skilled. But they were vexing and didn't seem to take anything seriously until the very last second. The moon above began to rumble as a thunderous yell echoed from within, exactly as Pain predicted. This is not the end of me. The moon virtually shattered in an instant, leaving on what Beliar stood on as the rubble was flung amongst them, killing the unfortunate souls who were unable to flee. However, as the moon's debris came to a halt, each ninja unleashed their most powerful distance attack. The attacks ranged from powerful dragons of fire, water, earth, and lightning to the humble kunai with an explosive tag wrapped around its tail. Both Kyuubi and Gobi added their attacks to the mix, hoping that this would be the final blow. It was then the turn of the Sannin to add to the payload. Jiraiya used another great flame from Gamabunta, this time combined with the power of Sage Chakra, as his best attacks were all close range. Tsunade caught one of the moon rocks and threw it back with all her strength, making her attack the first to reach Beliar. Orochimaru had a plethora of jutsu at his disposal, but he chose an old faithful jutsu that would not fail him. He used Impure World Resurrection to revive anyone who could be useful and bound those he knew would not listen to him, which was a small number given the circumstances. He had brought back former Akatsuki members Deidara, Konan, and Kakuzu, each of whom added their own specialties to the mix, Deidara with a massive bomb, Konan with her paper weaponry, and Kakuzu with a mixed elemental attack. He even resurrected Madara, bound him to his will, and had him perform Amaterasu. The deceased cages of the five great powers were next on his list, excluding Iwa because their first was still the Tsuchikage. Hiroshima and his brother immediately joined the battle because there were no words to describe what was going on. Sarutobi was much the same, and he summoned what appeared to be a stream of lava onto Beliar using his ancient knowledge of jutsu. Orochimaru, out of all the cages, noticed something. One coffin did not appear. And it was that one coffin that Orochimaru was really hoping would arrive. What the? Why was Minatos the only one to fail out of all of them? He was abruptly cut off by a massive bellow as yet another film of red energy encircled Beliar, shielding him from the remaining attacks. The attacks had only irritated him, and now he was ready to put an end to it as energy began to gather in large quantities at the spikes on his collar. You stupid humans have no idea what you're up against. As he lowered his shield, streaks of red light filled the night sky before crashing down on the army. Those who could flee did so immediately, but others were left to dry and vaporized. Even Kyuubi was reverted to his human form by multiple blasts and fell. It was a terrifying sight for those who survived to see the strongest entity on their side fall before them, but it wasn't over yet as Beliar continued to gather energy onto the spikes in his collarbone. Humans, this is the end of you. A blast of superheated blue flames ripped through his lower half, destroying the remaining platform of the moon he was now standing on. Beliar roared as he fell to the cratered earth, his legs slowly reattaching themselves. They were ripped off again when a reptilian tail cut through them. Following the tail, a foot crashed down onto the back of his spine before he realized what was attacking him. It was covered in dark, forest green scales and, while enormous in its own right, stood at least 100 meters, if not more, shorter than his true height. Its entire body was bulging with muscles and had a human-like appearance. However, its arms appeared to be more like front legs, with the inverted elbows and all, so it stood on its hind legs for the time being. It had spiked scales trailing down the spine of its back, tipped with a crystallized blue that began to glow brightly as the flames returned to its mouth. And its beaded black eyes were fixed on him, her entire being consumed by rage. You will cause no harm to anyone else. Wait, that's Yanbi. Kyuubi muttered as he dragged himself out of his own crater, gazing around in awe at the scene before noticing a light laugh nearby and seeing Rayne, grinning. There was still a chance. Awaken my son. What? Naruto responded, unsure of where he was. Everything had been pitch black moments before, but now it was bright white. And claimed to have just heard his father's voice. Is this correct? Is this the afterlife? Is this purgatory, or what? No. You're not dead. Minato's voice echoed in front of him, allowing Naruto to focus his gaze on his hazy figure because the light was not helping him. You must awaken. Even if everyone does everything they can, they will not be able to defeat Beliar now that he has nearly reached full power. What? How did you find out? And how do you know what's happening? Naruto yelled as his eyes adjusted to the brightness of the room, which didn't help. The entire area appeared to be a never-ending white abyss. I know because I can see through your eyes, just like I did when I gave you my chakra. I gave you a piece of my soul just for this moment. Minato explained as he proudly looked at his son, despite the atrocities taking place in the outside world. I wanted to see the world through your eyes, even if only for a moment, so that when the time came, I could truly assist you. Naruto had been taken aback by the situation, but what his father said. He had seen everything he had so that he could help him. Does that imply you know how to defeat Beliar? Yes. Minato stated simply while maintaining a calm expression. However, you will have to give up what you have become in order to become human again. Looking over at this father in awe as he realized that returning his very being to humanity was what he thought was impossible. But his father's plan could defeat Beliar, and for that he was willing to sacrifice his demonic and vampiric heritage. Stop stalling and tell me now, damn it. If it means dying for my family and friends, I'll do whatever it takes to save them. Nothing will get in my way of keeping them safe. Naruto growled, and before he knew it, he had crossed his father's face. Despite the overwhelming pride he felt from his son, Minato kept his face straight as he stumbled back from the blow. It is extremely simple. You must convert all of your energy into natural energy. A sort of sage chakra. What? If that's the case, why can't the old pervert do it? Naruto became enraged at his father and barked at him. Jiraiya lacks the necessary power. Neither do you have the energy capacity that you do. Besides, I said you should use all of your energy. This includes your chakra, as well as your Banpai Ryoku and Yuki. Everything must be transformed into pure, limitless energy. Minato remarked as he wiped the smudge from Naruto's hit on his face. As Naruto looked perplexed, Minato closed his eyes before his very being began to change slightly, demonstrating how to draw on natural energy. I understand you haven't yet learned how to use Sage Chakra, but it's very simple. I'm sure you've felt that there is an infinite amount of energy surrounding you, and all it takes is for you to draw some of it in. Once it's within you, all you have to do is control and tame it, which should be easy since you've nearly mastered your Yuki and vampiric energy. But once you've done that, you must allow it to become one with them and merge with them all. Your time, on the other hand, will be limited if you do this. Minato continued his explanation before pausing because Naruto appeared to have something to say. Why, you ask? Why should my time be limited if I succeed in concentrating all of my energies into a single source? Furthermore, would that be enough to bring down Beliar? I'm not sure if you could tell, but that fucker had a lot of power and had only recovered half of his body. Naruto inquired, as it was bothering him that he couldn't defeat Beliar in that time frame. It will, believe me. In fact, it is more than sufficient. The entire Earth is waiting for you, pouring out its power for you to take. Minato replied with a smile before ruffling his son's hair. My time is nearly up. Remember what I told you, and you will triumph. Wait. Naruto screamed as his father's body vanished in front of his eyes. How do you know everything? Minato tilted his head and grinned as the last of his image faded. Beliar isn't the only god involved here. With that final statement, the last of his image radiated vibrantly before white light blurred Naruto's vision and engulfed him. Naruto's eyes blinked open, and he heaved himself to his feet.
While he felt nothing while talking with his father in that world, whatever it was, he felt everything now that he was awake.
He stumbled towards the sound of combat and ferocious roars, grimacing as he fell to his knees only to pick himself up and continue forward. His vision was hazy, and he struggled to see more than a few feet ahead of him, sometimes even less as he tripped over a few fall trees. But he knew he was in the presence of others because he could hear them doing everything they could to harm Beliar. Nonetheless, he continued his march towards the battle, only for one roar to fade into a scream as a cacophony of laughter filled the air. What a force! You could have easily stood by my side and been my queen. Falling to his knees as he tried to quicken his pace because he couldn't tell who was fighting him on equal footing. It was Yanbi, but even her full power couldn't stop his rage, and now he was about to destroy her. Susanoo. Itachi's cry could be heard across the entire field, and even though Naruto couldn't see it, had never heard of it, or knew what it did, he instinctively knew it was meant to act as a shield, and he was summoning all the power he could muster to protect the Four Tails. But then there was a loud crack, and he had no idea what had happened. But he wasn't going to let that stop him. This had to come to an end before any more lives were lost. Naruto. Naruto. What the fuck is going on? As he saw his blurred figure run towards him, Sasuke's voice echoed from his side. You're in no shape to fight. Stay back and let us handle it. Get the fuck out of my way. Naruto growled as he pushed Uchiha away as he continued his descent towards Beliar, who was now focused on the mass of shinobi. I'm going to put an end to this right now. Sasuke was unsure what to say after staring at him for a moment and was joined by a few others, as he was completely bare of any clothing, as they needed help as almost everyone of immense power was either dead or badly injured outside of the Sannin. But what could Naruto do with his limited resources? What the hell is going on, Naruto? Light specks began to fall and were drawn into Naruto's very being. As he felt himself re-energized, his vision began to brighten and everything became clear to him. Sasuke wasn't the only one who noticed this, as the resurrected Hokages exchanged glances as if they had heard something similar before the third spoke. What should we do? Just clear a path for me, and I'll take care of the rest. Naruto barked, the light speckles slowly forming an ethereal light aura around him. Then consider it completed. Zabuza yelled out, despite the fact that his left arm was completely shattered and a portion of his chest appeared to be caved in. Many other shinobi barked in unison as they realized this was their last chance and did everything they could, including elemental ninjutsu, genjutsu, and even one with some strange, vibrant lion that seemed to be made of pure physical power. The glow erupted around him as he sped towards Beliar as his powers merged into natural energy. Beliar saw the blur of white coming straight for him, instantly realizing something was wrong as power with seemingly limitless potential had suddenly emerged. He reacted immediately by stomping the ant, declaring that he had had enough and that he would be sure to rid this world of any living beings this time to avoid having such a contest again. But his leg was suddenly pushed back as a pure energy blade sliced into it, courtesy of Gobi while she was still capable. Manda sprung from the ground the next moment, wrapping his body around his waist as Gamabunta and Katsuya slammed into Beliar's legs and held on. Jiraiya's voice abruptly kicked him into gear as this was the strangest sight he had ever seen. Use Manda to reach his heart. We'll keep him at bay for you. Naruto burst forward, jumped onto Manda's outstretched tail, and began running down the snake's spine until she reached the coil that surrounded Beliar's waist, and with a burst of power, he rose into the air far above Beliar, his right hand above his head, his left clasped onto his wrist. Beliar was prepared for whatever attack this was, and he wasn't going to let it succeed. His entire being had been drained, and he would need to rest after this because he had never encountered such opposition while ruling the world. Swinging his arms towards him, he bellowed in pain as his left arm was bathed in black flames and his other was pushed back by a gravitational blast, putting an end to any hope they had of resistance. Amaterasu. Tensai Shinra. To the horror of both Sasuke and Pain, the arms continued forward, ready to crush Naruto, when his arms fell to the earth below, two figures floating down from severing his arm. Did you forget about me, brat? Kisame yelled at Naruto, while Zabuza just shook his head. As he opened his eyes, a white Rasengan began to form within his palm before his eyes narrowed, sensing Beliar could no longer defend himself. This is the end for you, Beliar. Your reign will never be repeated. All the ninja could hear a battle cry as the blonde descended on Beliar, slamming the orb straight into his chest cavity. The god's entire body began to slowly turn the same color as the attack the very next moment, as a brilliant light burst forth from his back. As Beliar roared in agony, white light began to pour from his mouth. His entire being was being filled with the toxic power that was tearing him apart from the inside, and when he looked down at his attacker, he only saw a young child. Damn you, goddamn you. This will not be the end of me. It is already. As the white aura around Naruto began to dance violently, he responded by clutching his own heart. You cannot be. No. Beliar screamed as the battleground was drenched in radiant light. As his eyes slowly opened, this all seemed very familiar to him. In the hospital. Check. His entire family was present, even if some of them were bandaged from head to toe. Check. Sleeping on his chest 2 furry lumps of blonde and white hair? Check. What the hell happened? Did I go back in time? Naruto moaned as this scene reminded him of what happened after he took Beliar's right eye from Daisuke. No, you slacker. You rescued us. Naruto was surprised to hear Sasuke's voice in the room, and even more surprised that he had the audacity to call him a retard after kicking his ass several times. I'm not sure what or how you did it, but it worked. That fucker isn't coming back. His heart had been completely destroyed. There was no trace of it left. All that is left of him are the body parts he was unable to recover. Rayne explained, both of her arms tightly wrapped in casts, that she had recently discovered she was a terrible healer and that no one was going to let her try again. As he lay on his bed, he sighed with relief. It had been successful. Oomph. What was the point of that? You two, I just fucking saved the world. What was the point of that? Gobi had done the same thing the day before, growling at him before both she and Yugito reached out and grabbed him by the collar of his medical gown. You nearly gave me a heart attack there. Nobody thought you'd be able to do it. How could you have done something like that? If we lost you, we'd be left with nothing, you jerk.
Yugito screamed at him, violently shaking him with Gobi's help.
Everyone in the room decided it was a good time to leave because this was likely to last a while. But as soon as they left, the two exchanged a brief glance before returning their gazes to their original resting places, namely his chest and stomach. Ah, that's much better now that they're not here. Wait a minute. You two planned that? Naruto yelled at them, ready to unleash some unholy fury on them while hoping for the return of one of his friends or a family member. Yugito simply punched him again in the stomach while grinning. Of course. With everyone in here, it was getting crowded. We also wanted you for ourselves. I see. Naruto's brows twitched before he fell to his knees, remembering the sacrifice he had to make to defeat Beliar. I'd like to say something. Save it if it's about why you're human. Gobi responded, prompting Naruto to give her his fish impression because he couldn't believe they already knew. We found out pretty quickly when we couldn't feel your demonic or vampiric energies within you. And your message had also changed. And we really don't give a damn. Yugito continued as she snuggled her head into his stomach, which served as an excellent pillow. Neither of us cares what you are. All we want is to be with you. Both girls began to laugh as Naruto's expression remained unchanged, as if a small part of him wished that had mattered. He was going to have a difficult time dealing with two reckless women. He was only 13 years old. So, what are your thoughts? Rayne spoke as she leaned into Kyuubi's lap, who was stroking her hair while they were alone in their room. Kyuubi closed his eyes before taking a deep breath, continuing to do so because Rayne's hair was very soft and it somehow made her purr when he did so. I've never seen anything like this, and it should be impossible. He is no longer a demon, vampire, or human.
He has transcended all of those boundaries.
That's because he looks like me and is a jerk. Rayne grinned as she rolled over and looked up at her lover, who had a twitch in his eye and was looking down at her. And it shouldn't be surprising because he does things that should be possible on a regular basis. I suppose so. But having a visible god within the realm of man. I'm not sure how this will end. When people discover who he is. It makes no difference, Kyuubi. Rayne left him as she rose from his lip and placed her lips gently on his. Because even if they did learn, they can't get to him. He's our little god, and I'm going to make sure no one touches him. Kyuubi could only shake his head at Rayne for a moment before bursting out laughing. For once, you're correct. We can't let him go astray like Beliar did. He just needs to be loved, and he'll be fine. Rayne responded before squinting her eyes for a moment, as Naruto was already well liked, and while that was his motivation, there was something else he enjoyed far more. Remove that. All he needs now is a good sparring partner, and he'll be content until the end of time. Kyuubi only laughed, knowing how true that was.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.